Some artists are born into music. Others have to completely reinvent themselves to find their sound. Alison Wonderland did both. Before the massive festivals, before Coachella, before millions of fans. She was a classically trained cellist playing in orchestras in Sydney. Then one night, she discovered electronic music, and suddenly everything changed. This is the untold story of Alison Wonderland, Sydney, Australia, 1986. Alexandra Sholler grows up surrounded by music, but her world looks nothing like the EDM scene she will eventually enter. She trains as a classical cellist and becomes a serious musician. She performs with the Sydney Youth Orchestra, learning discipline, precision, and the power of emotion without saying a single word. But Alexandra wants something else, something unpredictable, something that doesn't follow a written score. She discovers electronic music and becomes fascinated by its freedom. Instead of hundreds of musicians, there can be one producer, one person, one laptop, one idea, and an entire world of sound. She starts teaching herself how to DJ, then how to produce. At first, it isn't about becoming famous. It isn't even about becoming a professional. She simply loves how electronic music makes her feel. Slowly, she begins playing clubs and building her own sound. But Alexandra isn't interested in simply becoming another DJ. She wants to combine everything she already knows: the emotion of classical music, the energy of electronic music, the darkness of underground sounds, and eventually, her own voice. She chooses a new name, Alison Wonderland, a playful reference to Alice's adventures in Wonderland. But behind the name sits a serious ambition. She wants to create her own universe, and that universe starts getting attention. In 2014, she releases I Want You. The track becomes one of her first major breakthrough moments. Suddenly, people are paying attention to this Australian producer who doesn't sound like everyone else. Then comes the album that changes everything, Run. Released in 2015, it reaches number 6 on Australia's ARIA albums chart and eventually earns gold certification. But the biggest surprise isn't happening in Australia. It's happening in America. Her first major US performance is at Coachella. Not a tiny club, not a warm-up room. Coachella. A massive audience watching an artist who only a few years earlier was still learning how to DJ. The girl with the cello has arrived at one of the biggest stages in electronic music. But Alison's biggest challenge isn't getting to the stage. It's what happens after she gets there. Success was growing, but so was the pressure. Alison Wonderland was suddenly expected to keep getting bigger. Bigger shows, bigger records, bigger expectations. And while the outside world saw a rising star, Alison was fighting a completely different battle. Her personal life became extremely difficult. She later spoke publicly about depression and suicidal thoughts during a period that involved an abusive relationship. It was one of the darkest moments she had ever experienced. But instead of hiding everything inside, she turned to music. And that decision would change her career. She began writing from a much more vulnerable place, not pretending everything was okay, not trying to create the perfect image, but writing about what she was actually feeling. The result was Awake. Released in 2018, the album became her breakthrough on a completely different level. It reached number 1 on Billboard's Top Dance/Electronic Albums chart. But the numbers were only part of the story. For Alison, the album was personal. Music wasn't just something she performed anymore. It became a way to survive. and the world connected with it. Then came another historic moment, Coachella. Again. This time everything was different. Alison Wonderland became the highest-billed female DJ in Coachella history at that time. The same artist who had once been a classically trained cellist was now standing on one of the biggest stages in electronic music. And she wasn't pretending to be someone else. She was bringing all of it with her. The classical musician, the producer, the singer, the woman who had struggled, the artist who had found a way to turn pain into sound. Her live shows became known for that emotional contrast. Heavy bass, massive drops, but also moments of real vulnerability. It wasn't just about making people dance. It was about making people feel something. And Alison wasn't finished. She created another identity waiting in the shadows, an alias called White Fang. Under that name, she could explore a darker, more aggressive side of her creativity. No expectations, no pressure to sound like Alison Wonderland, just pure experimentation. It proved something important. Alexandra Sholler wasn't trapped inside one sound. She could build multiple worlds. For years, Alison Wonderland had been moving forward. Tour after tour, festival after festival, album after album, always faster, always bigger. But eventually, life changed. She became a mother. And suddenly success wasn't measured only by crowds or chart positions. There was a completely different world waiting for her at home. It changed the way she looked at everything. The artist who once built her career around constantly moving forward now had something far more important to come back to. And that may be the most interesting part of Alison Wonderland's story. She never followed a straight line. Classical music led to electronic production. Electronic production led to Coachella. Success led to vulnerability. Pain became music. And eventually, music became a way to reconnect with herself. That's why Alison Wonderland never felt like just another EDM artist. Her music could be enormous. But underneath, there was always something deeply human. The cello was still there. The emotion was still there. The darkness was still there. She simply found a completely different language to express it. Today, Alison Wonderland stands as one of Australia's most recognizable electronic artists. But her greatest achievement may not be the festivals. It may not be the chart positions. And it may not be the millions of streams. It may be what she showed the people who were listening. That you can change direction. You can start again. You can take the parts of yourself that don't seem to fit and turn them into your greatest strength. The classically trained cellist didn't have to abandon her past to become Alison Wonderland. She used it. She took everything she had learned and transformed it into something completely new. And maybe that's the real meaning behind her name. You don't always find yourself by following a straight road. Sometimes you have to go down the rabbit hole, lose yourself for a while, and discover a world you never knew existed. This isn't just the story of Alison Wonderland. It's a story about reinvention, resilience, and finding beauty inside the parts of life that hurt the most. Because sometimes the person you become is far more powerful than the person you thought you had to be. And sometimes the music that saves you is the music you create when nobody else knows you're struggling. This is Alison Wonderland, and her story is far from over.